Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not So Dumb Blonde. My name is Caitlin, and I am so happy you're here. If you're new here, welcome. And if you have been following along since the original Not So Dumb Blondes podcast, welcome back. I am, like I said, I'm excited. I'm also a little bit nervous. I have not recorded a podcast episode in over a year, and I've never done it over video. So watching myself right now feels super odd, but it will continue to get better with time. It's also important to note that I do have better audio and visual equipment that will be happening moving forward in the future. So you can plan for that. But everything failed. My microphone failed, and I heard that this happens a lot. So I'm just kind of rolling with it. So I'm using this little teeny weeny microphone that I have right now, and it seems to work just fine. But just so you know, that will be happening. I may be looking down and taking a peek at my notes here and there, but I want to go ahead and get started because I am starting back my semester at school in a week. So this is really the only time that I have to record. So I'm just going to crank it all out today. It's a beautiful morning here in Denver, Colorado. I believe it is January 11th, and this podcast should be airing on February 4th. So just to give you a little bit of background on that, let's go ahead and talk about the agenda of this episode and what to expect moving forward with the podcast. So, this episode is really just going to be laying the foundation and explaining what this podcast is, what to expect moving forward, and really why I'm doing it. So, I'm going to go over the name change, why it went from the Not So Dumb Blondes with my previous co host Lauren, and why it's now moved to what it is now, just the solo Not So Dumb Blonde. I'm going to also talk about a little bit of the history of psychology and how it was built on the oppression of women, just because I think it's really important to touch base on that before we dive into deeper episodes. I'm going to talk about what to expect, not what to expect, what the structure of the podcast will look like, and just really give you all the lay of the land. So, let's go ahead and get started with that. So, the name change. This one is super important to talk about because I want to make sure that everyone knows that I am not reinforcing any sort of stereotypes with the name The Not So Dumb Blonde. This name actually really fits perfectly with the purpose of this podcast, which is to help challenge thinking and help stop putting women in boxes and helping them feel comfortable to express and be their true, authentic self. So, The Not So Dumb Blonde. The Not So Dumb Blonde's previous podcast was with my co host, Lauren. She is also a blonde female. And we had noticed growing up that we really felt challenged and felt like people did not take us seriously and they questioned our intelligence because of the color of our hair. And the entire podcast was built on women's empowerment and interviewing just really badass females who have done amazing things and sharing that with our listeners to help inspire them to achieve the things that they want, both personally and professionally. So, the name is still extremely relevant, but it's taking a little bit of a turn. So now the podcast is the Not So Dumb Blonde solo, and it's still challenging those specific stereotypes, of course, about how women have been placed in these boxes, but the podcast now is going to be focused more on women's mental health. It's going to be focused on mental health conversations. It's going to be focused on helping women set boundaries, stop people pleasing, and really feel confident to step into their authenticity and get their needs met. My story, why it exists now. Why am I now running forward with this podcast solo without my co-host? Lauren had decided to go ahead and start a family, beautiful family. She's obviously very busy. She owns a business of her own, and she's decided to take her own path. It's taken me about a year to really decide what I want to do moving forward with this podcast, but there's also been a lot going on. I within the last year went through a divorce at the age of 35 and changed my entire career path from being in corporate sales for 10 years to going to back to school to get my master's in social work and become a therapist. So a lot of things have changed, but what's really cool about this scenario is that throughout this process, I have learned so much. And I want to share it with you. I want to share it with you because I feel like so many women feel pressure to fit into some sort of timeline. They feel pressure to be a certain way for other people. And we're really going to challenge that on this podcast. And that's something that I've definitely learned throughout the years. And also as a woman who went through pretty significant childhood trauma and had to navigate and learn how to live with and overcome complex trauma, I really want to be the person that I feel like I needed during that time when I was healing and learning how to navigate life in a way that worked for me. I remember, going through when I first started my healing journey. This started about maybe 10 years ago. And I was searching everywhere for support. And what I would have done to have a podcast like this, or even have the social media tools that we have today to be able to see and understand that there are so many women out there that are going through so many different things that are similar, that are different. And we really are not alone. So I want this to be a safe space. But I also want to ensure that everybody knows that I'm learning too along with you. I am 100%. I'm going to school right now for my master's program. I'm going to be sharing things that I'm learning along the way, but this is also a learning process for me as well. So this podcast will never be me positioning myself as any sort of form of authority or telling anybody what to do. This is going to be a safe space where we learn and we grow together. And hopefully some of the insights of things that I've learned along the way are things that people would find inspirational or helpful for themselves, of course. I want this podcast to be the home of the Retired Good Girls Club. The Retired Good Girls Club is filled with women who have spent a majority of their lives trying to be the good girl, trying to be the cool girl, and they're really ready to step outside of that and really step into their full authentic selves and find healthy ways to get their needs met, ask for what they want, and actually get what they want. This includes ending people pleasing patterns. This includes setting boundaries with friends, family, coworkers. There is just an endless amount of opportunity for growth when we step into our authentic selves. So if you are looking for a podcast where you're getting advice on how to stay small, how to fit in, how to make other people feel comfortable, this isn't going to be for you. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I want everyone to do what works best for them, but transparency is important for me, and this is just not going to be the place for that. We are not going to at all push any sort of narrative or advice for women continuing to feel small or suppress anything at all. This is going to be about feeling safe and feeling confident to be big and be yourself, whatever that may be, and not continuing to feel like you have to make other people feel comfortable. So, let's talk a little bit about the history of psychology, just because I think it's important. I made a TikTok video about this. I think it was about a month ago. It was just a quick video and it went viral. And I was surprised at how many people were not aware of this and how interested people were in this topic. So I'm not going to go into too much detail in this episode, but I am going to talk more about it. I think it's on the next episode, or maybe it's the third episode, and really go into the history of psychology. But the history of psychology was built on the foundation of oppressing women. This is not an opinion. This is not an idea. This is actual fact. I will talk much more about this moving forward, but I want to make sure that I make note of it so that women know that the things that they're experiencing and feeling are not coming from nowhere. You're not crazy. This is real. And it happened decades ago, well before we even were aware of what was going on. Any sort of diagnosis was built on pathologizing women for having normal, healthy emotions. And it's just how it was created. So it's just important to know that once we have awareness, we can move forward, we can do things with it, we can improve. And I just want to make sure that I throw that out there. So again, we'll talk about that more in future episodes. Um, what to expect, what not to expect. What to expect. We're going to be having real conversations with women about women, and we're going to talk about different ways to set boundaries. We're going to talk about interfamily systems. We're going to talk about attachment styles. We're going to talk about setting boundaries. We're going to talk about career stress, life stress, dating stress, everything that you can think of in the average, day-to-day life of a woman. We're going to be discussing that. We are also going to be talking with clinicians and professionals who are far more experienced than me, who will be sharing evidence and science based healing modalities for you all to try out if you want to. And we will be really taking into account trauma-informed care on this podcast. This is going to be a trauma-informed podcast. A lot of what I will be talking about will be about how to manage trauma, managing difficult emotions and situations. So you can definitely expect that. I will also be taking in stories from listeners. I want stories. I would love to hear any feedback. I would love to hear any topics that you want to hear on the podcast. So, all of that will also be taken into play. What not to expect. I will not be trauma dumping. No one will be trauma dumping on this podcast. I will not be processing anything in real time. And I will not be naming names of anyone from my personal life or any listeners who are writing into this podcast. I want to make sure that no one who listens in on this podcast feels like they need to take any of the advice that I'm giving. I will not be framing any advice as something that you should do or that you need to do. And if I do, please call me out on it. One thing that's really important on my journey of becoming a social worker is I want feedback. I want to build the best practice that I can for you. And I can't do that without knowing what's working and how you all are feeling about how this is going. So please let me know if you ever feel like I am framing something in a way that, just doesn't sit right with you, or, um, that makes you feel like you're being, diagnosed. Oh, that brings me to my another point. There will not be any sort of diagnosing on this podcast as well. We will not be doing that. But I do want to hear your feedback. I want to hear how I can make this podcast better, whether it's about the content, whether it's about the actual visual quality of what's happening here. Please let me know. This is a community of women. I am not afraid to hear your feedback. I want to do the best that I can. The structure of the podcast is going to be built on dialectics. This is really important to discuss as well, because you will notice it in a lot of my episodes and how I approach and push different topics. Dialectics means that two things can be true at once. It also comes from my favorite type of healing modality, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, where it really is just exploring this idea that there is no absolute truth. It really challenges black and white thinking. And especially when we're talking about topics as complex as human psychology and mental health, it makes sure that we continue to validate the complexity of each human being's experience without trying to put anyone in or simplify their experience, if that makes sense. So, this idea of dialectics means that I will really be playing devil's advocate a lot. I will be challenging different narratives. I will be doing that. And that doesn't mean that I'm pushing my own agenda or my own opinions. It means that if I notice someone making a statement or talking about a scenario in a particular way that feels very narrowing, I may challenge that a little bit just to make sure that we are all able to find the nuance and push some of those judgments that we all have. I have them too. I mean, I am a person, and we are all people. Obviously, I have my own judgments as well. And I am going to constantly check myself when I make judgments or when I start engaging in black and white thinking, because it will happen. I am not immune to that at all, but I am aware of it. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. So you'll see me challenge others. You'll see me challenge myself, and you can challenge me on it as well. It's really important. This is a safe space. So I want to make sure that that is put out there. Checking my notes really quick. Okay. So we also need to talk a little bit about disclaimer. So I am not a therapist. This podcast should absolutely in no way, shape, or form replace any sort of therapy. If you're experiencing any sort of mental health emergency, please call 911. If you're having thoughts of suicide or harming yourself or harming someone else, please text the crisis text line at 9888. I am working on building my future practice. I would love to work with some of you in the future, but for right now, I am not taking clients. So if you are looking for a therapist in your area, I'm always happy to provide resources. If that's something that you're interested in, you can always reach out to me for that. If you're looking for a certain type of therapist that you're interested in working with, because there are so many different types, which will bring me into my next topic, I'm happy to do that as well. I also want to touch a little bit on social work and how it differs from a psychologist, how it differs from a counselor, and why that's important for this podcast. So, social workers are trained to work with the individual and assess the individual and their environment, in their environment. So, what's really important to know is that as this is a trauma informed podcast, anyone who's experiencing trauma, whether it come from their childhood or anything that has come from their outside environment, social work is going to be addressing that. Psychologists really focus on the individual neurologically, right? Counselors are also focusing on the individual and their individual experiences. Social workers are really taking in and assessing the individual and their entire environment and what is making their entire experience. So that is why this podcast is really going to be talking about real life stories. We're going to talk about how growing up and your experiences growing up really do impact how you are feeling today. That also ties back into the history of psychology and how that can play into some of our experiences as well. But that is what social work is all about. So I will never just be looking at something from one angle. I'm always going to be talking about everything that could be contributing to a person's experience, which is what I think makes social work really special and which is also what makes me so proud to be a social worker. I also want to note that a lot of my listeners and a lot of women in general really struggle with understanding whether or not what they're feeling is their intuition, if it's their nervous system, if it's their trauma. We're going to be talking a lot about that, although I cannot tell you what, is your intuition or what is your nervous system or what's coming from trauma. I do have a free guide on a free self reflection on my link tree where you can go through, and it's really just like a very low pressure guide to help kind of spark that thought process as to whether or not you may be reacting more from your nervous system, if you're dysregulated, or if it is your intuition. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free. Like I said, it's really there's no like answers, there's no tallying of points. It's really just kind of like a self-reflection to help kind of trigger some of those thoughts and get the mind going in that area so that you can start recognizing your nervous system and if you are dysregulated and really start building that trust with yourself. I have also created what I'm super, super, super excited about is a dialectical behavioral therapy inspired workbook that is just really designed to help women learn how to speak up for what they need and actually get their needs met. And what it does is it really helps build confidence because a lot of the times it's really difficult for someone to feel comfortable asking to get their needs met if they don't know if it's going to work. So again, I mentioned that this podcast is really going to be talking about the foundation of dialectics. Dialectical behavioral therapy is an incredible form of therapy. It doesn't work for everyone, so I'm not going to push it on anyone. It worked great for me. It's worked great for many other people that I know, but there are actual real-time tools, templates, you can fill it out. It gives you statistics, it gives you the science behind why this works. And it really is going to just be backing up everything that this podcast is about for women to stop putting themselves in a box, stop people pleasing, and start feeling comfortable sitting in their authentic self and asking for what they need and getting them met. So you'll find actual scenarios where you can be like, okay, this is something that I'm experiencing at work. This is the need that I need to get met. Here's how I can do it. There's actual fill in the blank templates of how you can explain, whether it's over email or in person, a certain scenario to get your needs met. There's also tools in there to help you decide how important the need is and at what level you should be expressing getting your needs met. There are also tools in there to help you assess and understand the emotion behind the need that you're trying to get met and decide whether or not it's something that is important to address or if it's something that you can address within yourself. So, if you are interested in any of that, please check it out. You can also find that in my link tree. Moving forward, I just want everyone to know that I'm really, really happy that you're here. I'm so excited about this podcast. I'm very passionate about it. I have been putting my heart and soul into this and just really trying to get this up and launched before I start school next week again, because I know I won't have any time. But I really hope that this feels like a safe community for you, for all women. And I'm so excited to learn and grow along with you. I cannot tell you what the incredible things that I have learned from you all, from the incredible women in my life, whether it's friends, family, or women that I work with, women that I follow on social media or in podcasts. I just am continually amazed by all of you. And I want to see this podcast grow. I want to see it turn into something great. While that is not the purpose, it is something that I am working hard towards. So all of your support is so greatly appreciated. If you're interested in learning more about this podcast and what it has to offer for you moving forward based on some of the information that I talked about today, please hit like and subscribe here on YouTube. Go ahead and follow me on TikTok at It's Therapy K, Instagram at It's Therapy K, and then also the podcast Instagram at It's Not So Dumb Blonde _pod. These are also great places for you to write in different topics that you'd like to be talked about and your stories as well. If you think that you have a great story or you'd like to be interviewed on the podcast, please let me know. I really want to hear from you. And I know people say that all the time, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I want this to be a successful podcast and community for women. And I cannot do that without hearing from you and hearing what needs to change. As long as we're not being mean, I want to hear everything that you have to say. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you again so much for being here. And I look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.